Just days before the controversial civil rights attorney Stephen Yagman was to be sentenced in federal court, full disclosure learned that federal judge Stephen V. Wilson had dismissed 6 of the 19 counts of tax evasion and fraud after the jury found him guilty. This court order was never reported by the press or by the mainstream media, nor was it posted on the U.S. Attorney's website, nor did they issue the usual press release about these facts. Being the news behind the news, we sought out legal reaction to this extraordinary development. We asked law professor Stan Goldman from the Loyola Law School if this was a common practice.
It is very, very common for lawyers at the end of a trial to make a motion for a retrial or a motion to strike various counts that the jurors have found the defendant guilty on. It is rare that such motions are granted because typically if the judge didn't believe there was sufficient evidence to justify legally a conviction by a jury, the judge should have probably struck the counts before the jury ever had a chance to consider them.
So why did Judge Wilson strike these counts after the trial? We remembered that according to Mr. Yagman, he has had a long and enduring relationship with Judge Wilson. In 2001, Mr. Yagman told full disclosure in his interview.
I've known Steve Wilson for 20 years. He's a U.S. District Judge. He lives down near me in Venice. I see him on the beach all the time. We're friendly. I don't recall ever having a bad word with Steve Wilson. I think he's a great judge. We're landsmen from New York.
You're what?
Landsman. L-A-N-D-E-S-M-A-N. It's a Yiddish word for people who come from the same place.
I see. Does this indicate a conflict of interest for the judge? Was this relationship disclosed to the prosecutors? We explored this with the U.S. Attorney's Office and talked to Tom Rozek, the Public Affairs Officer for the California Central District U.S. Court. He claimed that this had not been disclosed to the prosecutors. We wondered if this non-disclosure was legal or ethical. According to Professor Goldman, the judge should have disclosed his relationship to the U.S. attorneys.
So the question becomes if, for example, a lawyer is actually a defendant in front of the judge, is that sort of relationship in which you're friendly with somebody enough to disqualify you? Well, it depends. I mean, there are friends and there are friends. I mean, we call a lot of people our friends who are really just acquaintances. Judges don't have to disqualify themselves or suggest that they perhaps should be disqualified or might be disqualified simply because you're an acquaintance of somebody who appears before you. But it is nonetheless something that should be revealed because the reality is that the other side may have a different view of it. And the other side may want to argue that, well, you know, Your Honor, how close are you? How many times you had dinner with them? Do you feel that it could interfere? No, I don't feel it could interfere. Well, Your Honor, I feel that perhaps the impartiality of the law and the requirements of such impartiality might suggest that perhaps you should recuse yourself in this case. And then the judge would have to decide whether, in fact, the judge thought that there was enough to justify such disqualification. Once again, if you're just an acquaintance, you've met somebody, I don't think it requires it. Close friends with somebody, perhaps the opportunity should exist for all parties to be able to consider and argue it. And it may very well be the judge is completely correct. Once again, who are you going to get to try a case involving, say, a lawyer defendant if you can't use the judges in their jurisdiction? Do you send every case to a different jurisdiction? But nonetheless, the disclosure should happen.
So there was no disclosure. Why? Is it possible that Mr. Yagman, in his interview with Full Disclosure, was embellishing his relationship with his friend the judge? And now Judge Wilson will be responsible for sentencing Stephen Yagman.
We should always examine the possibilities that a judge is engaged in behavior that they shouldn't.
We want to know what you, the viewers, think. Number 1, do you think that Judge Wilson should have recused himself from the trial of his friend Stephen Yagman? Yes or no? Number 2, do you think the media and the press deliberately did not report Judge Wilson's acquittal of several counts against Mr. Yagman? Yes or no? Number 3, are there sufficient checks and balances in the judicial system to assure judicial integrity? Yes or no? Please respond to our survey and be sure to leave your comments below. Thank you.